For our last panel of the day, I'm very, very pleased to welcome Scott Mainwaring to moderate this panel. Scott serves as the head of the External Advisory Board of IMTFI, which is a position that he has occupied since the very, very, very beginning. Scott has been involved in the kind of conceptualization of IMTFI and how it would work and how it would run. And he and I together have been sort of tending to this baby and helping it to grow and grow and grow into the wonderful thing that it is now. So, what do you need? Okay. Scott is, as I said, the chair of the Institute for Money, Technology, and Financial Inclusion External Advisory Board, and has over 20 years experience applying ethnographic research to the design and analysis of technosocial systems, including new payment technologies. He was formerly at Interval Research and after that at Intel, and helped found here not just IMTFI, but another research institute devoted to social computing. And it's really, truly a delight always to have Scott here, because not only do we get to have him moderate and we benefit from his insight and experience, but later on, he and I get to sit together and think about what it all means and what we do next. So Scott, thank you so much.
Yes, pondering the imponderables. Thank you, Bill. And I'm very happy to be moderating this last session for today. I think we'll be, or I know we'll be looking at research happening in Bangladesh, in Colombia, and in Cambodia. And I think sort of one thing that links together these three papers is a real interest in trying to get inside the minds of people using mobile money or other financial systems, and what does it take to kind of grab people's attention and engage them. So without further ado, I will turn things over first to a Skype presentation that we have from Jonathan Mordek at NYU.
Hi, I wish I could be there. If it's any consolation, it is snowing in New York City, so I hope you're all enjoying California. I'm going to talk today about some work that I've been doing with a group of colleagues, and we've been trying to think about new ways of engaging and thinking through how people spend money and think about money that comes in the form of digital payments. The project is focused on risk preferences, time preferences, and willingness to pay. And the big question is, does it matter if you get that money via cash or via mobile payment? This is a project that is joint with Jean Lee, who's here at NYU with me, Abu Shanchoi, who's there in the middle, who is in Japan, in Tokyo, at IDE JETRO, and Hassan Zaman, who has been the chief economist at the central bank, the Bangladesh Bank in Bangladesh. So I want to do a few things in this session. I want to briefly talk about Bcash. Some of you are probably familiar with Bcash. I'm going to briefly talk about monetary ecologies, which is an IMTFI kind of way of talking about how we think about money. I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that's been done in the US on different forms of payment and how the money gets spent. Some of that work is done in economics, some is done in psychology. We'll talk about our experiment, our questions, and then ultimately the results we're going to have to wait for. We're still in the field. So Bcash. Bcash is one of the great success stories of mobile money. Mobile money has been expanding extremely rapidly in Bangladesh, and especially through Bcash. It was founded in 2011. It's a joint venture of BRAC Bank, part of the great NGO BRAC, together with the US LLC Money in Motion. Other investors are IFC, the Gates Foundation. But Bangladesh is a place with big cell phone penetration. In 2011, when Bcash started, there were 73 million mobile subscribers. Bcash then launched and now has about 14 million Bcash mobile money subscribers. There are about 100,000 agents nationwide for cash in and cash out service. And the main service is payment services, but there's also a mobile wallet, which provides salary deposit, shopping payments, etc. So the way that Bcash is promoted and sold and advertised is as a payment platform. So here's one poster, which is of a college kid, and his parents send him money safely and securely through Bcash. This example is much closer to the context that we're looking at. This is Sukina, who's a garment worker, and she's moved from her rural location into Dhaka. She works in a factory, and she's saying factory, overtime, household chores, and the added hassle of sending money home. Now I send money through Bcash. And we are interested, as I'll show you, in what happens when Bcash becomes a medium for migrants to send money back and forth and how that changes welfare. But this particular slice of the project focuses on a somewhat different question, which is wrapped up in that. And that brings us to monetary ecologies, which is this question of how money is viewed as it changes from being hard cold cash to something digitized and more abstract. So does the digitization of money dematerialize the symbolism and physicality of money? That's from the IMTFI call for proposals. You're probably familiar with that language. And does it have consequences for how individuals and households make decisions regarding spending, investment, and saving? Those are questions that we're really interested in. In much simpler language, the question boils down to something like, is a taka, which comes on your mobile phone, really viewed the same as a taka, which comes as cash? That's the big question. Now, there are lots of ways of thinking about this problem and lots of different theoretical approaches. There's one which has been developed by a group of people, but it's associated with a sociologist at Princeton, Viviana Zelizer, whose book, The Social Meaning of Money, makes a very strong argument that money is viewed differently depending on who earns it. It depends on who earns it and how it's earned, so that different kinds of money earned by different people in different ways may be spent differently just from the nature of that process. The process of earning it transforms it into something different, and we distinguish between different kinds of money. That's one reason why we might see money on a mobile phone being spent differently than money in cash. If, say, the money in the mobile phone is coming from your daughter who's migrated into Dhaka and sending money back, you might view that money differently than money you've earned on the farm, which is the money you have in cash. To sort that out, we want to do something a little bit more structured, because that's only one part of the story. We're really interested in something slightly different. So there's work in the US which also has the same feeling, and that's also asking whether a dollar is a dollar. And a lot of that work is focused on whether cash is the same as money in credit cards. Now that's a different question, because credit cards now brings us the form of payment. It introduces that idea, which is close to what we're interested in, but it also creates a functional difference, right? A credit card decouples the moment of purchase and consumption from the moment of payment. So credit cards actually do something functionally different. It's not just about whether it's plastic or cash. It's also about liquidity and whether you can spread out payments. So we might expect to see differences in behavior with plastic or cash simply because of the nature of credit. There's a different view on credit cards too, of course, which is that it doesn't really feel like real money when it's on a credit card. It's like play money, right? So we think about it as maybe like play money. That's a little bit closer to some of the ideas that we're exploring here. So I want to turn to a paper that motivates what we're doing. It's a paper done by psychologists, one at NYU at the Stern School, one at University of Maryland. And it's looking at the effect of payment coupling and form on spending behavior. So they do a number of things. I just want to give you a sense of what they're doing and how it relates to what we're going to do. So payment coupling is about the act of spending and the timing of when you're actually paying. So the first study they do looks at credit cards versus cash. And they do this. They bring a group of students into this experiment. It's a lab-style psychological experiment. They bring a bunch of students together, and they paint a picture, a scenario. They say there's a restaurant in New Orleans. It serves delicious, spicy food, and there are 9 menu items, and we are going to ask you, how much would you be willing to pay for those 9 items? Okay, so they give them a menu, but they take away the prices. So prices are gone. They list 9 of the items, some vegetables, some fries, some rings, oysters, whatever the 9 items are, and they ask them to price them. But the intervention then adds a twist, which is that for some of the subjects, they add a logo. You can see I just added a logo on the bottom of that menu. They add a logo, and the issue is whether prompting people with that logo changes the way they behave. Seems like a small thing, doesn't seem like it should make a difference, but their results are when they're presented with the logo, the subject group that has that intervention ends up spending more, on average about $4.50 versus $4. So it makes some effect, not a big effect, but it takes us down a path toward understanding. So here's another study. Same paper, but here they're looking at the form of spending. So this is important because when we're thinking about credit cards, as we said, it's not just about the form, it's also about timing. So this study looks at whether you give someone cash, real cash, versus a note, scrip, or the promise of cash. So in some sense, it really is looking at play money versus actual cash. Is a dollar really seen as a dollar, or does its form matter? So here's their experiment. They hand the students, they again bring in a group of students, they split them up, they're mixed by gender and other variants. They give one group $50 in cash to allocate. They give the other group $50 in scrip or play money. The groups are told to choose certain items from a grocery store, and they're given a bunch of descriptions. And they've got to choose which items they want. For example, they have to buy some soup. But there are expensive soups and there are cheaper soups. And the question is, which do they choose? There's told to buy pens. And the question is, do they buy cheaper pens or less cheap pens? They've got this $50. They know they'll get money back. They can roughly spend, and these items should cost around $20. And the question is, what do they end up buying? The answers, and this is across a few items here, soup, toothbrush, ketchup. And you can see scrip is the white column and cash is the speckled column. And you can see uniformly they're spending more when they're not holding that $50 bill. When it's not real money, they're spending more. On average, it's not a huge difference, but it gives the sense of what we're describing. So that's the work that's been done so far. What we are doing is something different, but builds from the kinds of questions that people have been asking. We're working in 2 areas. One is Gaibandha district, which is in Rangpur. Rangpur, it's up by the Indian border up to the northwest of Dhaka. Dhaka is the star on the map. Gaibandha is one of the poorest regions of Bangladesh. It is subject to regular annual famines. There's a famine season, September through November, called the Manga. And during that season, famines are particularly prevalent. But even outside of Manga season, Rangpur is one of the lowest rates of food consumption in Bangladesh. We're working with an NGO that is doing something interesting, which they're working with families and they're training young women, particularly, to become garment workers and move to Dhaka. So they're particularly interesting for Bcash. And one of the things we're doing then is providing Bcash or encouraging Bcash for some part of the population that GUK is working with, not for others. And thus we have an experiment to see what's the impact of easier access to mobile money. And so here you got a picture of a rural cash-in, cash-out agent, the factory, and a group of garment workers in Dhaka. So the big questions we want to know is if transfers back and forth are made easier, if they're facilitated, does that affect well-being, especially during the manga season, especially during this pre-harvest famine season? What happens to food consumption variability? What happens to health? That's the big question we're going to ask through this experiment. But we also have this additional question, or these sets of questions, which are related to the topic that we've just been describing around monetary ecology. Is there any risk, and this is the big question, that some of the remittances will be spent differently because they're coming by mobile phone, not through cash? And is there some risk that maybe there'll be overspending on non-essential goods or luxury goods because the money is somehow dematerialized or seen more abstractly and thus not weighed with the same kind of consideration that cash might be given? It's an open question. We don't know what the answer is, but it's big as we move toward a digital universe. So what's new? Well, we're jumping off from Raghubir and Srivastava, which is the paper I just described, but a very different context with mobile money. We're looking at time and risk preferences as well, and we have a lot of experimental variation also that has to do with access to Bcash. Our sample is families sending migrants to Dhaka. Most of them are very poor, living on under $1 a day, but they're familiar with mobile technologies, and as I said, half of them have been experimentally introduced to the technologies. And we're interested in impacts of gender, class, occupation, age, etc. So the big questions we will be asking have to do with risk preferences, and I'll show that in one slide. We'll be looking at time preferences, which is sort of discounting between the present and the future, and we'll be looking at different trade-offs between present and future to identify that. And we'll also be looking at willingness to pay along the lines of Raghubir and Srivastava. So very briefly, here's the kind of way that we might look at risk aversion. This draws on work that was pioneered in India decades ago. And the issue is looking at a series of questions, like I'll describe in a moment, but with prompting in cash and prompting on mobile phone. So the questions for risk aversion might be, if you're given a set of gambles, which would you choose? There's 6 gambles here. You could choose something very safe, which is flip a coin. You get $33 if it's tails, $33 if it's heads. That's no gamble at all. You could do the safest thing. Maybe that's your choice. Or you could choose a gamble like this one, $18 if it's tails, $62 if it's heads. So you lose a little more and you gain a lot more. Maybe that's a better gamble for you. Or you might go with $0 or $95. You lose more, you gain more. So the question is, how much risk aversion are you willing to take on? And these are calibrated to line up with economic models. Those are the kinds of questions that we're going to ask together with prompting on the form of payment. We've been piloting, we've chosen groups, we've done some pilots of baseline surveys. We're now in the process of rolling out the experiment and these questions. So our pilot so far has been very encouraging. We've seen high take-up, which was a concern, but it looks very good, and we will have results to come in the coming year. So thank you.
I think we'll move on at this point to hear from Andrew Crawford on television comedies, money in Cambodia.
So is this working? Hey, all right, cool. So thanks everyone for sticking around so late. I know it's tempting, especially if you've got jet lag, to pop off early for a bit of a sleep. I just came from Cambodia yesterday, so I'm still on Cambodia time, and it's about sunrise now in Cambodia, so that's what I'm thinking of right now. So if I just start like staring into the distance, thinking the projector light as sunrise, just bear with me. I'll click back into LA time, or to West Coast time. So today I'm going to talk about mobile money financial literacy using television comedy. So I'll talk about a few things: mobile money in Cambodia, the current difficulties with financial education in the past, how we can possibly use TV comedy to provide this financial education, and then the research study that we're currently doing to measure the effectiveness. So just to give you some background, I lived in Cambodia for 2 years, working for Monash University, where I'm from in Australia, and also for the Australian government AusAid program developing the microfinance industry in Cambodia. So that's why I'm still thinking about that. All right. So mobile money in Cambodia, it's been dominated since it was developed about 8 years ago, I think now, by a company called Wing, which worked with an Australian bank and the Australian government to develop a really large mobile money network across Cambodia. It includes all these things. So you can do payroll, you can get your pay paid into your Wing mobile money account. It handles multiple currencies because in Cambodia because the financial system was completely destroyed by the Khmer Rouge in the 70s, they had to adopt US dollars, but they still use US dollars, and they have a Cambodian riel as well, so it's a mishmash of currencies. You can also use e-commerce, so you can use Wing to, it effectively comes like PayPal in Cambodia, so you can even, some richer Cambodians, you can order a pizza online and pay through your mobile money account. So it's really, really prevalent. There's over, I think, 7,000 agents or something. So it's almost like M-Pesa in Kenya, where it's just this, it flows throughout the economy. You can also get ATM cards that are connected to your Wing mobile money account, and you can make just regular deposits. So Wing recently got a deposit banking license, so they're effectively now a bank. They can't make loans, but they can now take, they'll probably start paying interest on the money that's in your Wing account. But there are other players, so they have had this sort of dominant position in the past, Wing, but now AMK, which is a microfinance institution, has got mobile money set up, and also AC Leader, which is a MFI and a bank. So their competitors are growing, but Wing still has a bit of a dominant position. But there are problems. As I say, it's usually used it's usually used across the country, but the poorest people still don't use Wing. They see all these agents everywhere. It's very prevalent, but there's a lack of education in the country. So Wing do well at advertising and get the green logos out there, but a lot of poorer people don't understand what exactly Wing is, how it works, and how they can benefit from it. The difficulties with providing this are like any financial education. It's very expensive to go around the country doing little sessions in small focus groups. It's very slow to zip around 14 million people in Cambodia. There's, as we talked about in the previous session, there's sort of lack of interest issues. People get bored if they're just told something, like you are now with my presentation. I can't do that much comedy, I'm sorry. I wish I could. And it's a low level. When they've done studies, like big meta studies have been done that have found just generally there's a low level of effectiveness with traditional generic slide-based sort of or very simplified financial education, as you can sort of see here. So moving on to TV comedy in Cambodia. So Cambodians love comedy. It's a huge thing there. TVs are very common. So as you can see from the pie chart here, it's about, there's a value missing there, but that's I think about 36% or something. So in total, it's over. So it's like 98% of people watch TV. They either own a TV, but they also watch it on buses. So a lot of Cambodians travel around the country on buses, and they usually have a TV on the bus. And so, as I was talking about with a colleague of mine today who's worked in Cambodia, you'll sit on a bus. traveling between two cities for 2 hours with non-stop laughter around you. It'll just be Cambodians just cracking up like crazy, watching all the comedy they love. And so here we did a survey of a few hundred people and found that for 62% of the people we surveyed, comedy is definitely their favorite thing on TV. So it is a very, very common thing. They have a great sense of humor as well. I love the Cambodian sense of humor. All right, so recently, earlier this year, the Cambodian Microfinance Association, who I was working with, and a Luxembourg-based NGO funded comedy TV. They decided to do a financial education comedy TV show. They're partnered now with CTN, which is the #1 TV station, and the Cambodia News Channel, and also the bus companies to get them running the show. And we finished the first episode, so it's complete, which I'll show you in just a second to break it up so you don't have to listen to me too much. And then right now we're developing the mobile money episode, which is the main one we're going to study once it's complete, to study its effectiveness. So I'll play the video. It's only about 5 minutes, and you can see if you find it funny as well.
អាចឲ្យយើងមានលទ្ធភាពបង់រំលោភបំណុលរៀងរាល់ខែមិនតែប៉ុណ្ណោះពួកយើងក៏មានជីវភាពធូរធារជាងមុន ពេលនេះខ្ញុំមិនត្រឹមជាជាងកាត់សក់ទេខ្ញុំមានកូនជាងហើយខ្ញុំក៏ជាគ្រូបង្រៀនកាត់សក់ដែរ
ការបង្កើតចំនួនខ្នាតតូចហើយនឹងការគ្រប់គ្រងវាឲ្យបានល្អធ្វើឲ្យជីវភាពយើងរុងរឿងហើយនឹងអាចជួយផ្ដល់ការងារអ្នកផ្សេងដែលអាចជួយដល់សង្គមផងដែរ
What did everyone think? It was funny? He's cute, isn't he? Jenny was just saying at the end that how his hair was like tamed by her, like when they got married. Actually, I was in Cambodia last week and I went to a Cambodian wedding. One of my good Australian friends married a Khmer girl out in a rural area. And it's a lot of fun. Like, it's a bit like an Indian wedding. Like, it goes all day and there's a lot of funny ceremonies. One of them is where guests take turns coming up to cut little chunks out of the bride and groom's hair. And it's meant to symbolize, like, you don't actually do it. It's like you get these golden scissors and you just kind of fake it. But it's meant to like symbolize the dawning of a new day, how there's a big change in your life. And you also, everyone takes turns as well going up and tying little red strings around the bride and groom's hands. I don't know if they do that in other countries. And yeah, that's like the connection that the bride and groom now have, and then only a monk can cut them off 3 days later. But if you ever get to go to a Cambodian wedding, I would highly recommend it. It's a whole lot of fun. And again, there is a comedy host for the wedding. Like I'm serious. That's how much they like comedy. For instead of having like a monk or a reverend or something, you have a comedy host that hosts it, and like it's sort of like the comedy host just makes like teases it's like a roast kind of situation where he'll do introduce the ceremonies and also tease the bride and groom. Like he made this joke about how the groom's mother is more attractive than the bride. And yeah, I'm not kidding. It was it's just check. They love comedy. Check anyway, so that's the show. So that's the first episode. Now we're focused on mobile money. So we'll do a little bit of testing for that first, but our main focus for the research will be on the second episode, which is about mobile money, which is in production now. Originally, they were going to bunch it all together, but then the Microfinance Association decided that mobile money, it's a complex issue, so they split it now into its own episode. So with our research, we're going to check if these comedy shows are effective in teaching people about mobile money specifically, whether it has a short-term or long-term impact, and can we measure this impact using two methods, focus groups and also sort of aggregate data. So we needed a sample focus group, and we decided to use garment factory workers because it's a huge number of low-educated women usually, and we wanted to focus on women and improving their access to mobile money. There's over 400,000 workers in Cambodia, so it's a huge export industry in Cambodia. Like all the major brands all have big factories there of up to 3,000 workers in one factory. More and more companies are shifting to Cambodia because it's got such a low cost of labor relative to countries like China, or even Vietnam now is getting expensive, so they're all shifting to Cambodia. A lot of these women, they get just paid cash, usually about $140 per month, paid in cash. They can't save it, so they often send it back to their parents, or any they have left back to their parents, often on the back of motorbikes. So they'll have like a motorbike guy, has a little storage locked little box, rides his motorbike back to a province. It's very inefficient. So mobile money, we think, would help these women a lot in safety the money. They can save it if they want to. They can send it instantly if they want to. And also, they're usually quite young. When I visited these factories, I'd say some of them were a bit too young. They're meant to be 18. But anyway, that's another issue. but they're often young and they usually watch TV. So it seemed like a good test sort of market, or test sort of group. Yep. So when we do these groups, so we're going to the garment factories themselves, and we'll be doing 3 different groups. We'll have a treatment one where we'll show them a generic financial education video. So what I was showing you before, sort of slides, and someone speaking about the different concepts. The second one where we show the TV show, the mobile money episode, once it's finished, and then a control group where we just show a generic comedy show. Yeah, so there's 2 elements. So we'll do some quant research where we'll conduct surveys with factory workers. We've got support from an organization called Cambodian Women for Peace and Development. They regularly go to garment factories and provide education to workers during their lunch breaks. So they have a small room in many of these garment factories. The workers come for lunch, and also they're presented with some education. Often it's about things like sexual health, workers' rights, issues such as this. So we'll be sort of hijacking some of those sessions to show the video and to run these surveys. Also, the qualitative research will also, some of these sessions will do one-on-one interviews and also focus groups, just general discussion. So we'll get some qualitative feedback from the workers about what they think about the videos and whether it's changed their beliefs in mobile money. And also we'll do initially, and then we'll also do 3-month follow-up sessions after 3 months to see if they've this long-term, if there is any change, whether it sticks over the long term or whether it's only just after seeing the video that they remember. So there's the initial sort of pilots we've run. So this is in a Levi's factory. They're at a few weeks ago, right near Phnom Penh. So we showed the video, and then everyone laughed a lot, and then we just had some general sort of feedback, and we found that they really enjoyed the comedy itself, and that there seemed to be a lot of positive feedback following. So hopefully when we run the surveys, we find this quantitative data as well. We'll also do, so the TV shows, that's the sort of focus group, but the TV shows will be broadcast on TV with our partnerships we have with the #1 TV station. So the CEO of Wing, Anthony, they have the Wing is owned by the same company who owns the TV, the largest TV station. So we'll be easily able to broadcast it. The CEO of Wing is actually, his wife is actually the host of Cambodia's Next Top Model on CTN. So yeah, so we have strong connections with the TV station. So we'll be able to broadcast it a few times, and we'll run surveys, phone surveys using a call center before and after to see if people saw it and what they thought, whether it changed their perceptions of mobile money, things like that. We'll also look at some macro aggregate data that we get from Wing to see how many new mobile accounts were started, and also microfinance institutions, and try to see whether it encouraged young clients to start mobile money accounts, and how, if those new accounts, how much they were used, and whether it continued in the long term or whether it became just a novelty thing where, let's try Wing, but then they forgot about it after a week not seeing the show. So after we do all those different models of testing, so focus groups, phone surveys, and the macro data, we'll produce a research paper that will provide the background I showed you, the barriers, the reasons why TV comedy might work in Cambodia. Then we'll provide those results to review the effectiveness, and then we'll share these results with the Microfinance Association, the government, and scholars, to show its level of effectiveness. So we think that, it could possibly provide another method of financial literacy programs. So I'm not saying it replace everything, but it could be another very cost-effective way, because the program, each episode that we make here costs about $8,000 US, which is not very much at all. And you saw it was quite high quality, in my opinion at least. And so it could be quite a cost-effective, broad range. You can show it across the country to a lot of different people very easily. And if it works in Cambodia, other countries that like things that are funny, you could potentially scale it to that as well. So thank you very much for supporting me. this guy is supporting that, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Okay. Are you back online?
Yes.
Okay.
So see, that's the problem that I normally have when I come to presentations. My computer, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because it's Mac or it's PowerPoint for South America or whatever, but it never works here. So anyway, we'll have to see it this way. So what I was telling you is that when we talk about legal workers, we should actually put the barely legal workers there because, like I said before, in Colombia, basically, if you wash a dish in your house, then you're formally employed. Like, that's how you appear in statistics. I mean, it's quite easy to appear as a formal worker. So one of the things that covers is that 43% of people in Colombia are basically self-employed. Which is not really self-employed, that's not really having a job. 46.4 earn below the minimum wage. So if half of the population in a country earn below the minimum wage and there's nothing being done by the government or the state to fix the situation, I mean, there's something clearly wrong with the way things are being run at the moment. And 50% of the workers lack any social security coverage. That we're talking about health insurance, retirement plans, professional risks, and family fund, which is kind of like a fund that helps you with education for your children. The other thing is that these people are basically independent workers and the self-employed, which I told you is basically people who don't have a job, so they have to just go look whoever wants to hire them and pay them for the job. And the other thing is that they are unskilled or have very low skills. And these are the industries basically where they work: fitness and beauty, the outsourced textile and garment industry, manufacturing sometimes, retail and sales, and delivery and packaging. And the card thing I already told you. So for example, this is a beautician that does nails, like pedicure and manicure. Where she works, she doesn't have a contract. She basically pays a fee for using that local, the commercial space. Now, she brings her own equipment, the supplies, the different nail polishes and everything. And she also pays a fee for keeping the place clean. And then what she makes, she has to, for example, if she makes, let's say, $20, $10 go to the owner of the commercial space. So that's basically an employee. I mean, okay. So next slide. So here we want to show you more or less what the methodology that we used was, or we are using. For the data collection, first of all, this is an exploratory research. And again, last time it was the same thing. So rather than trying to find statistical validation of our findings, what we're trying to do is understand the scope of the problem and understand the different views or different perspectives that touch a specific issue, in this case, the formal workers. We are working with 24 informants, and what we do is basically approach them on the street on their way out of work and talk to them. And we interview them, semi-structured interviews. We do video ethnography. And then for the analysis, what we basically ask for is the work arrangement. Is it written? Is it not? What's your obligation? What's the employer's obligation to you? And things like that. We also try to look at that interplay between having to work a formal job but living an informal life. So how does it match? I mean, how do people pay taxes and at the same time send money or make transactions in the informal market? How do they put the puzzle pieces together to make money management work in their lives? And then we also touch on the financial behavior and access to healthcare in terms of how they manage the risks, especially in those cases where they have to be the ones who pay for their own risks. We contrast the different behaviors. We try to identify common patterns between different people and different profiles. And we're talking there about values, attitudes, and perceptions. And then finally, we transform those values into guidelines to develop new products, like the next one. So for contrasting behaviors, then what we do is that these are different people that we have talked to. We try to understand, are they, for example, careful planners when they get the money? Do they already know how they are going to use that money, or do they take more spontaneous decisions? Like if I make today 80,000 pesos, which is like $40, am I going to spend it on an impulse purchase, or do I already know where it's going to go? We look at people that have, for example, submissive personalities, people that may fit better as an employee, or people who have an entrepreneurial spirit that's looking always for, okay, I can make a business out of that. So we try to take like the different opposites. If we find common values among all those different people, then we know we're onto something, because whatever you design for so many different profiles, it's got more chances of being adopted. Next. Okay. So I'm going to give you some examples. Then, as I was saying, we talk basically about work, money, and risk. So, for example, in behaviors, in work, most people tend to use or rely on word of mouth for finding a job. And they use referrals. Then why is it that people use that instead of using the government's and many other companies' websites for finding jobs? And it turns out that, first of all, as users, they always have frustrations because all of these websites only come up with really low paid jobs. They are basically like the bottom of the job market. And the other thing is that they always find that by recommending someone, you're also talking about trust, honesty, willingness to work. So it's more important the type of person that you're hiring than the cover letter or whatever capabilities you have on your CV. The other thing is that when you become this type of flexible worker, you no longer have the upward mobility trend that we used to see in companies in like probably the 60s or something like that, that you could start low on a company and expect to be climbing positions until you were CEO or something. So there's like a typecast phenomenon in which, I mean, you're a car washer, then I'm gonna offer you a car washing job. But the guy had studied graphic design, and he never can move from that little frame where he was put. So here we're showing those underlying factors. So it's a matter either of trust, typecasting. It's a consequence of having triangulated jobs, which is basically when temp agencies start dealing with the employer and the employee, and then, I mean, it's very difficult to create a relationship in the company you're working for. In terms of money, most people, what we find is that even though accounts like payroll accounts in banks are already common, people just withdraw the whole amount once they get paid. So was it because it's not enough? In some cases, but in most cases the reason is to avoid account deductions, because the bank then starts charging for every transaction. If you look at your balance, if you call a phone line to see if you received the money, I mean, they make a lot of deductions. So people are not really using mobile money, even if they could, because the bank is using their money, taking a lot. And the other thing is that is just to stay below the fiscal radar, I'm sorry, which is not only will the bank take your deductions, but the government will also take a part of your salary because you need to pay for whatever tax they had implemented. So people just prefer to stay informal, even though we are already talking about formal jobs. In terms of risk, what we see is that people will spend, for example, out-of-pocket money to pay for healthcare in like their children, because the healthcare providers that are managed by the government, they are really poor quality. So then that's when you see where the money they save goes to. People actually like to pay for speedy service or a better doctor, things like that. The other way to interpret risk is that instead of, I mean, it's so difficult to retire in Colombia that you have to work until you're like 67, and then you have to have worked 1,200 weeks in your lifetime. And normally they don't appear in the system, so you have to end up working more so you can finally retire and things like that. So people don't trust the system. In fact, 90% of the people in Colombia that make contributions to a retirement plan never get qualified for receiving any. I mean, it's just to pay the other 10%. So 90% of the people are subsidizing 10% of the people, which is unfair, I mean, clearly. So what do people do? They simply either make those payments and forget about that money, or they try to make some other kind of investment. Normally what they do is just build, for example, a second floor in your house, and then you rent that space. So that becomes the source of income when you're retired. Finally, the only insurance that we found people buy, no matter what, is the funeral costs. It's a really cheap insurance, and it's the only event that they know will happen, so they will get covered. And so that's one of the main reasons. Okay, I don't know if it works. I forgot already. I'm traumatized. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples of those findings that we have so far, because we're kind of like 50% through. So in terms of enduring formal work, workers assume all the risks. So employers no longer pay for the risk. They don't pay for healthcare. They don't pay for anything. If you want the job, then you have to show your slip that you did pay your healthcare, that you did pay your professional risk insurance and your retirement plan. So for example, what we see people doing is that companies give them like the on-the-job training before hiring them. So that's more or less a month of work that they don't have to pay. The future employee, to become eligible among many candidates, they have to take training courses. I mean, spend time training courses. They have to pay mandatory insurance, and they get from their salary, they get deducted from the tips for paying glassware, the uniforms, things like supplies and everything. I mean, even if you get some type of salary, it lowers as they take money from you, and that's illegal. But it's pretty much all over the place. I mean, we haven't found any place that actually respects the law. The other thing is that when you have self-employed people or free agents and, or people that work outsourcing, competition is so tough, especially in garment industry, that either the person that hires that worker will not require him, but will take his word that he paid for that insurance, the health insurance. And also, what the worker will do is just opt out from those mandatory requirements so he can lower the price. So it's at my own expense, but I get the job. At least I get some precarious income. So that's the other thing. So what we're thinking here is that we need to offer incentives to compensate social protection benefits. What that means is, please pay it, but we'll give you a little bit more. I mean, offer incentives so people don't feel tempted to opt out from mandatory services. The other thing is to provide social dialogue tools. One of the things that you see is that before you had, let's say, unions or groups of people that were together, that could discuss, that could say, this is unfair, or we are being unfair, or things like that. You just talk. But when you have a dispersed army of independent workers that cannot even talk to each other, then where is going to be the social dialogue between companies and workers? I mean, there's not going to be negotiation, and that's a right. So this is another guideline that we're sure that we need to provide with whatever solution we can come up with. Other things that we found in that work sphere is that children become a source of motivation to get ahead in life. They become the priority. Their parents are willing to do anything in order to let their children have a life that is better than what they had. So credit is often linked to child care or childhood expenses, future payments in college, things like that, so that they can provide for a better future. So to raise children in safer neighborhoods, we have had cases of people that made extremely huge sacrifices so they can have their children grow in a better neighborhood, but it's safe, and they know, I mean, they take that risk. The other thing, I already told you about word of mouth, so, which is the issue of trust. So what we're saying here for guidelines is that we need to ensure that we need to offer tools that ensure a better future for the kids. That's one of the main concerns. And second, to leverage the referrals and networks and word of mouth through whatever solution we come up with in order to foster the like finding new jobs or better jobs. Next one, because I think I'm kind of like spreading too much. Anyway, in terms of money, it was surprising for us that even in this low skill, low salary, most people had smartphones. Like, some of them were better than ours. So, anyway, so they do see that as an investment. It's a job. It's a tool for the job. It's a way of communicating. It's a way to check if the employer already paid them, so they can check the balance in the bank via an app. So that was striking. And the other thing is that payroll accounts are quite common. So the things are there. We just need to organize them so they work well. Another thing, like I said before, payroll accounts have fees and deductions that vary according to the transactions, and that's a deterrent of really using a payroll account. I mean, if you're just going to withdraw all the money, all of what you're doing is same as a check. You don't really make good use of mobile technology. The other thing, cash transactions are always preferred to stay below the fiscal radar, not paying taxes. And the other thing is that most of them do financial planning. They're quite organized. They know exactly what they are going to get, where it's going. And for example, when they are paid every 15 days, they already know the first 15 days they cover food, rent, and utilities. And the second one, it goes to pay, for example, school supplies, clothing, transportation, and things like that. So it's done by memory. And there's always like a pre-allocation of resources. So we need to help people. For example, a payroll account could use that type of functionality so people can pre-allocate what they are going to use. So they can visualize easily how to spend the money and how, for example, how much they're saving actually or not. The other thing is that we can use this to recommend related products and services into the payroll account. If you're eligible for a credit, for example, people don't go and try to find an informal loan or go to an institution different from your bank. I mean, they don't even consider the bank as an option for getting a loan. And it's just because the bank is actually missing that opportunity or suggesting type of investments. Either CDs or some type of deposits that can be more profitable than just leaving the money in a payroll account. Okay. Another thing, managing risk. Then this is like our main finding here, is that there's no insurance for like low-skilled people or people with low payments or low salaries. They are simply not an interesting market yet. There are some initiatives with micro-insurance, but there's a huge barrier for adoption there, and it's that banks are the ones offering insurance for when you get sick at work. But there are so many exclusions that pretty much no one will ever be able to cash on that type of insurance. That does a great disservice to the insurance industry as a whole. So it needs to be more personalized. Like you cannot just sell that online, like one size fits all, because risk is different for every person. Then risk is strongly associated to fear of not being able to provide for your family. That's different from healthcare. I mean, if you go, everyone talks about healthcare. No, that's not the concern. The concern is not being able to work. It doesn't matter if I'm sick or not, but if I don't get that money like home tonight, then my daughter won't have anything to eat tomorrow. So it's a different way to understand the same problem. And it should be included in the mandatory part or whatever the government subsidizes. That should be considered there. The other thing is that most flexible workers can barely afford mandatory insurance. I mean, the minimum wage is around $300. And right now, 15% of their income is going to mandatory health, retirement, and risk, like on-the-job risks. And you'll never see that, and you'll never get good care. And if you have an emergency, that's probably the only situation in which they will move and give you like the surgery you need. So that's wrong. But then you compare that with the funeral expenses, and it's only $8, which comes to be 0.2% of your 0.02 or 2% of your salary. That's a reasonable amount for microinsurance. I mean, 15% of your income. I mean, if 30% goes to pay your rent, 15% goes to pay mandatory expenses that you won't enjoy, and then you still have to pay utilities and food and education, because in Colombia it's not free. So you're basically lost. I mean, you come to this life owning a lot of money already. So in any case, a common means then of protecting oneself is to use religion. So In the Catholic Church, we have like thousands of saints that are specialized in different areas. So people, what they do is that they may not have an insurance for a car, but they will stick a rosary on the car so it's not stolen. Or there are some other like prayers, images. So using religious images like this, for example, this is a doorman. And the way he makes sure that the building is not ever robbed is by having the crucifix, and then he has the Milagrosa Virgin Mary and another Virgin Mary. So he's like triple insured. No one will rob him. This is the card thing with the rosary, and this is a signage thing that says, "Stop, don't rob me. Jesus and Mary are with me." So, okay, so that's kind of like the insurance replacement. And we think that this is a good way to interpret what people feel are like the most important risks in their lives. And one of the most important ones is San Pancrazio, who is the patron of jobs and workers. So if you're in need of a job, or if you don't want to lose your job, or if you want to do well in your job, then you always keep one of those little cards. I mean, it reminds me of my nephew that he plays that magic game that is with cards and powers, and then I will hit you with this card. It has a special power and stuff like that. That becomes pretty much the way you insure yourself with saints. So that's kind of the deal. What we recommend in this case is that at least we should promote add-on complements to mandatory insurance. For example, if you can lower a little bit the cost of the premium, like the mandatory insurance, but then you let people personalize a little bit. So for example, I want emphasis on childcare. I'll take a specific product or microinsurance so that I know that I have the best pediatric care and speedy pediatric care, then people will do it. I mean, they will make the sacrifice. So we think that that could be a good option. And that's especially because Colombia is undergoing right now a structural social security reform, and they're planning to reduce a little bit the cost. So I think it's right on time to consider that type of idea. Finally, in that risk management thing, there's a low possibility of meeting the requirements for retiring, and this is what I told you about. See, this was a house. You can see the architecture or the finishes are completely different from the second floor. So that's what they do to make sure they have an additional income in case they cannot retire. So this, we pretty much already talked about this. I'm going to skip through this one and tell you more or less what the, okay. So in innovation opportunities so far, this is the way we see it. People don't really use internet on a computer, like this computer, desktop. They really use their cell phones. So if we start using cell phone as a way of congregating diverse people or diverse, like atomized or dispersed workers, then we can create a marketplace where people can exchange services, they can offer services, or maybe they can hire people. And by using the same analogy as like social networking sites, we could probably visualize, like for example, I needed someone to take care of my pet, and then I go and look and I see that my masseuse actually knows a gardener who knows someone that trains dogs. And so that's like the recommendation. And then you can have the additional reviews for, hey, maybe a person, if he knows whoever and he's friends with whoever, then I can probably contact that person. So this is one way that we think it can work. Also, in terms of insurance, helping people make decisions. They all know that there are products in the market. Big insurance, I mean, not microinsurance, but they don't even know how to understand which one is better than the other. So having that type of analysis can help them make informed decisions. Same thing for legal advice, accounting advice, and let's say job statistics, so they can check what markets are going, like are hiring the most. We also found that people are beginning to get training on like a number of disparate trades. Like you can have someone that cooks but also makes shoes and things that are not really related, and it's just because that's an opportunity for them to find a job, whatever comes up. So that's the reason why we think that that might be important. And also having a possibility of getting alerts of whenever a job I'm interested in comes up in the market. Okay. The second part, it would be to provide savings incentives. So for example, here, we're telling a person, hey, why don't you pre-allocate $450 this month? Just $450, keep it there. We'll hide it for you, but it's there. Okay. Visualizing pre-approved loans and things like that, and allocation of expenses. I'm like one from ending, okay? This is what I meant with the basic insurance type of view that we think of. So there's the mandatory part that you have to pay. Let's make that a little bit smaller, but then let's offer these add-ons. So I can use either elder care or I can choose at-home care, like some kind of a specialty that fits me. Same for pension and same for education. Right now there are only products for college, but there's nothing for high school. Then finally, this is the last one. Okay. What we're saying is, to become competitive in the global market, what do countries do? They first implemented flexible labor laws. Then employers transferred all the risks to the workers. Then like another industry player comes, which is the temp agency, that basically makes profits out of triangulating between the employer and the employee. And then what do workers do? Jump through hoops to get any job. Like everything is taken out of them. So what we're doing is saying mobile technology can help disperse flexible workers to meet in one place, one digital place where they can develop business relationships, manage their finances and risk, and have social dialogue. That would be a way to get ahead in life. That's pretty much it. Okay.
Okay, well, we made it through some daunting technical issues with that panel. Thank you all again. Do we still have Jonathan? Next on the agenda is reception and dinner, but I think we do have time for a few questions. If anyone would like to take advantage of that.
Hi, I'm Ivan Small from Central Connecticut State University. I just had a couple of tangential ethnographic questions from your presentations. Andrew, I was fascinated with the motorbike remittances that you were talking about, and you said these are quite efficient, and these motorbikes actually have capsules that are used to take the money. So I was wondering if there's any issues with that in terms of safety, if there's been cases where those motorbikes have been robbed. And if not, why is there a concern about switching over to other remittance forms? And Anna, I was fascinated with the funeral insurance and the fact that everybody's kind of buying this funeral insurance, and you know that everybody's going to die. So I just want to know a little bit more about that. They're paying $8 a month, and starting at at what age are they starting to pay these fees, and what is the cost of a funeral? Why would these insurers actually have this kind of insurance if they know that they're going to have to pay out? Thank you.
Yeah, regarding the motorbikes, yeah, I was probably speaking a bit too fast. I was saying that they're a very inefficient way and that they are very unsafe. There's been a lot of, if you're a factory worker and you're sending just money on the back of a motorbike, and it's not always used, but it is still used, and yeah, it can get robbed. Accidents can happen very easily, so that's why we're keen on switching people to mobile, garment workers to mobile money, because it's a lot safer, it's instant. So we think the Moto method is a very bad idea. Yeah, sorry if I didn't make that clear before.
Okay, and in terms of the financial, the insurance for funeral costs, I don't know if I made myself clear. It's $8 a year, and it covers different members of your family. So it's actually a pretty cheap way to pay. I mean, a burial in Colombia could be between $1,000, starting from $1,000 up. So for a family to assume or to take on that type of unforeseen event, that would be a lot of money. So it makes sense to pay and not burden your family with having to pay for, like, probably lose some type of quality of life just because you died. It's kind of like not burdening your family with more.
So I was curious about why does it make sense then for the insurers to do this?
Oh, competition, because there's competition between insurance companies and the funeral homes. For the funeral homes, it's easier to get that money up front, so they know that when that person died, that's the client, you know? So they're kind of like stealing clients. So it might not be as profitable as it could be if only insurance company were working on it, but it's pretty much competition. Yes. Understood your question.
Alison Truitt with Tulane University. I have a question for Jonathan. In terms of the study that you're doing, I'm wondering if you are also going to analyze what percentage of the wages the factory workers will be remitting home in terms of a kind of part of your study. And I'm just thinking about the work that's been done, let's say, by Leslie Chang and Factory Girls, and Mary Beth Mills, about there is this tension between the factory workers withholding some of the money in order to spend it on themselves and remitting it back to their families. And I was wondering if that was part of your study.
Yes, it absolutely will be. And it is an open question about how well that's going to work for the factory workers and their families. So I'm glad you raised it. It's an important part of the core questions.
I have a question for Andrew, and my name is Amol with GSMA. So my question for Andrew is about the what informed the content of your guys' television comedy sketches. So not everybody can use television, but yeah, if you're using radio, if you're using magazines or whatever else, can you share some other ways other than comedy is popular, that there might be some other things that you guys use to inform your decision on what kind of content you used and how that is changing behavior, or how you intend that to change behavior of some of your subjects?
Yeah, so the show was produced by a company called Khmer Mekong Films, which has produced various TV series for I think about 14 years in Cambodia. So we provided a sort of brief to the production company of what we wanted, like the different topics we wanted covered and different goals of the program, and then they went ahead and drafted a script, and then we sort of provided a bit of feedback on that script, but it was mainly the production company and their sort of knowledge of how to write comedy that is appreciated by Cambodians, that Cambodians find funny. So we sort of met in the middle, and but it was mainly informed, I guess, by their previous experience with it and their understanding. In terms of other formats such as radio, I mean, I think the radio is a lot of potential as well in Cambodia, but I think television is much more widely viewed than radio is sort of. The audience for radio, I think, is quite small in Cambodia, so that was our decision for why we focused on TV.
There's different ways that creative content can go. In this case, you guys trusted that you guys hired somebody that had experience already creating creative content and just kind of adapting it for your specific goals.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that could be applied in other countries. I mean, not necessarily using comedy, but knowing that you've got a show or series or something. I mean, I know this is not necessarily a new idea. I know Mexico have a long-standing soap opera that implements various financial concepts into it, and also I think Pakistan has a really popular TV series that had very subtle, at least from what I've seen, very subtle sort of financial education elements that was, I think, funded by financial literacy sort of NGOs. But I think the novel thing about this is that it is, for one, it's a comedy, which I don't think has been done before, from my knowledge, and also that it's quite short episodes, and also that they'll be shown in buses, which I think is a relatively new concept, because a lot of Cambodians don't own a TV, but because they're often traveling between provinces, especially garment factory workers who need to travel from Phnom Penh or one of the central garment factory areas back to their province, they're often on buses watching these shows, and so I think it's a very useful format on that on the bus TV.
I think time for one last question.
Thank you. I'm Sostenes. I run the Financial Sector Deepening Trust. Jonathan, you're aware of these FSDs in Africa. On the research questions you put up, and you covered 3 areas: risk preferences, time preferences, as well as willingness to pay. I just want you to unpack a little more, because I didn't understand well how these are going to play off against the study that you are doing. I just wanted to know, the outcomes of your research questions. What are these going to be? And the second one is, are these 3 the only ones that could determine whatever behavior you are trying to examine? And to my colleague I forgot your name, Madam, Anna, you talked about influencing users of mobile financial services, hiding money somewhere. I think you're talking about some planning that comes out of their behavior or the objectives they have. So what informed you this kind of intervention?
Yeah, thanks. This particular part of the study is going to focus on these questions: risk preferences, time preferences, and willingness to pay, because they're questions that psychologists, economists, sociologists have been asking about, and no one's really looked at it in the context of mobile money. And so we decided to focus there for that part of the research. But the research is much broader. So I'm glad you raised the issue. The fundamental questions have to do with how mobile money helps people deal with crisis, how mobile money helps people deal with a time of famine, what the effect is on food consumption variability, total consumption variability, what's the effect on health. And in that, we'll also be looking at other motivations, social motivations, et cetera, But for the part of the study where we are trying to understand preferences, we're going to narrow to the questions that are already being asked in the literature and try to bring in the mobile element to that existing conversation.
Okay, and the reason why we came up with that idea of helping people to have like a stash is basically because many of the people that we interviewed, they keep some kind of money in case of an emergency at home. So it does not give you any interest, and there's always inflation, and there's always money costs less. It's less value every month. So if you keep it in your payroll account, at least they are making some interest out of that money, and they are keeping the value of it. Also, when I said, you get access to loans or credit or things like that, depending on your credit history or your history with the bank. So if what you do is just take all the money every month, you're never going to have access to anything, any loan, anything. It's the same as if you didn't have any services with the bank. It's like me saying, we're just trying to encourage some discipline plus making a little bit more, getting a little bit added benefits from using a payroll account. That's pretty much it.
Okay, I'd like all of us to thank once again our participants, both here and in New York.